This is the Guided Podcast, an interview with the fly fishing industry's top guides and brand ambassadors. On this podcast, we cover topics such as the guiding lifestyle, conservation, different fisheries globally, and gear and technology to improve your game. I'm your show host, Greg Keenan. Before we begin today's show, let's thank our sponsors. Scientific Anglers is the leader in producing the world's best fly lines for over 75 years. Scientific Anglers have set new industry standards with their SA Amplitude family of fly lines, both in technology and performance. See the difference for yourself today at scientificanglers.com. Show your show support and follow us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to Guided. Today our guest is Jeff Currier. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Greg. Pleasure to be here.
No worries. I'm excited for you as well. I guess it's kind of funny. I know off air, I was just saying to you, like, I was preparing for this interview and I'm just like, I don't know where to start and whatnot. So I think I'm going to start at the beginning, and the beginning for you is walk us through or tell us like how you have this amazing job and this amazing career, how it became real for you and how you landed this particular job.
Well, it definitely wasn't planned. That's the first thing I'll tell you. And I get asked all the time how to do what I'm doing. And it's like, I don't know, because it wasn't a formula. I started out working in a fly shop after college. It's kind of a little deal I had made with my dad. You know, I wasn't really going to go to college. He's like, you got to go to college. And when you're done, you can screw off all you want. So I went to college and actually graduated in 4 years. Hopped in my car and drove straight out to Wyoming and worked in a fly shop. And I didn't know if that was going to be, a couple of years, 5 years, maybe a few months, who knows. But it ended up being a 23-year job. And the fly shop was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So I went from stocking the shelves to, doing fly casting lessons, to teaching schools, to guiding, to actually circling back and managing that shop. And all I can say is that Jackson Hole is an incredible platform for meeting people. It wasn't a little rinky-dinky fly shop in some, strange state. It was a big-time shop, and we had a lot of influential people. We had a lot of people that spent a lot of money and fished all over the world. And so I was very fortunate to learn a lot of things that most people don't get the opportunity. And then also the opportunity went from there to actually traveling myself. And, that's how it started. And, here I am.
Crazy. Now you're not just traveling. I believe you're traveling and scouting for Yellow Dog, fly fishing adventures, as well as for your own video and footage as well, right? Tell us a bit about that. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say that's right. But, long before Yellow Dog, so I started in 1987 in that fly shop. I was traveling, for some reason. It was just something, I had a bug in my ear that I felt like I had to see the world. And that was probably because, customers were coming in and getting outfitted for New Zealand and outfitted for Belize. And I had to go to those places. And I was, my boss wanted me to be able to sell those people stuff. So I was sent to places like that at a young age. But then I got the travel bug. Then I started doing, crazy stuff on my own, adventure, travel, just to see places and try to discover things. And because I had that background when Yellow Dog came around, and also it helps that I was good friends with the founder, Jim Klug, they contacted me and said, we need to have you as an ambassador and help us, develop some of these new places and check them out and make sure they're legit for the average person to go fishing. So I've been very lucky.
Oh, I bet. So what are some of the most vivid memories and wild places that you've been to that you can recall in your travels?
Well, I mean, I've got a lot. I've got kind of this, when you travel like that on your own, especially back in the late 80s, early 90s, before we had the internet to get us around, you traveled with the Lonely Planet. You just read about the area you're going to, you had no pictures, you had nothing. So a lot of times you got into trouble. and found myself in some bad places at times. I traveled all of Central America on the local buses. So I will say that in El Salvador and Nicaragua, we had some tight situations at times. Managua was not a good city to hang out back then. But at the same time, and even in recent years, I've had weird things happen, like fishing with my good friend Misty Dillon over in India, he's kind of the king of fly fishing from Mossier. And in 2008, I ran into a tiger, and that was a wild one. So I have some very vivid memories of that tiger. I will tell you that.
So, like, I'm just trying to picture. Are you like walking around in India, or you're just like fly casting on like some riverbank, and this tiger jumps out of the woods? Like explain to me what that's all about.
Yes, it's a long story, so I'll give you the short 2-minute version. But we were in a very thick jungle in northern India, up around the Ramganga River, which is very close to Corbett's National Park for tigers. And the first thing you ever ask when you camp in India is, has anybody ever seen a tiger here? And everybody will look at you, and usually you have a staff of a dozen people that are helping with camp, and none of them have ever seen a tiger. That's how rare the animal is. So I was not expecting to see a tiger, and I was hiking through the jungle, kind of getting to a new spot, and it was a pretty good haul to get to where I was going. I was with my little, he wasn't a guide; he was kind of my chaperone. I've been with this kid all week. He didn't speak a word of English, but he was super cool. We had our little, we figured out how to communicate pretty good. And for our friend that day that was armed, I said, I'm probably going into an area with leopards. Nonetheless, it didn't slow me down, and those guys were so busy chatting it up. A lot of times I'd get too far ahead of those guys, and I knew for like 2 hours that something was following me. I mean, the hair was standing up strange in the back of my neck, and the animals were acting weird. I didn't know what it was. And, in the long story, I explained all that stuff. But in the end, I finally got myself. I was doing a shortcut to get to a piece of the river. And that feeling hit me so strong, I froze, and I looked up, and the tiger was on a rock behind a bush, just getting pretty darn close to jumping on me. I think another few steps, it was game over. Wow. And luckily, he spooked. My behavior spooked him, and watched this massive tiger just turn and vanish in the jungle.
Wow. Crazy.
Yes, that's very vivid.
But the hair on my neck standing up just hearing that story. So
it's a good story. If you ever see me at a bar, you definitely want to hear that. For the full detail of that one,
I'll definitely have to meet you at the bar. So, hey Jeff, are you like? I know you're an artist with painting and stuff like that, but and we'll get into that in a second. But are you like documenting? Is there anywhere where you are documenting all your travels and stuff? Like, or is there videos of this that we can talk about?
Well, unfortunately, some of the older times not. I have handwritten journals and cabinets here that someday, when I'm old and I can't travel anymore, I will probably turn into a big, beautiful book. But since 2009, October 2009 to be exact, I have written about every single day of fishing. So if you go to my website, jeffcurrier.com, and go to my blog, you will be able to go all the way back to 2009, and every single adventure I've been on since then is fully written with photographs. So, for instance, if you Google up fly fishing in Bhutan, you're going to find my story of going over there with the World Wildlife Fund trying to find golden moss here. So, yeah, a lot of my stuff is right out there for people to enjoy.
Wow, you truly have traveled to some pretty awesome places, that's for sure. So. And I highly suggest that the listeners check that out if they're remotely interested in learning more about what you're doing on that, for sure. So, Jeff, as I mentioned earlier, you're into artwork and you do some painting. Tell me about that.
Well, I guess it was in the early 90s. I was doing shows for some legendary fly fishermen. I was hanging out with Gary LaFontaine and Jack Dennis and Mike Lawson. I was kind of their baggage carrier. And while those guys were doing demonstrations at the shows, I would be selling their books and videos for them. And the reason I had that connection is Jack Dennis was the name of the fly shop I worked for. So Jack would bring me along to, help sell stuff for the store for him. And but I was also communicating with the customers at the shows, and I was just getting off the ground my saltwater fly fishing career. Gary LaFontaine was sitting behind me while I was waiting on a customer, and I was explaining to him how to make a tarpon leader. And Gary goes, he just nonchalantly goes, "Curry, you should write a book." about saltwater fly fishing. I looked at him like his hair was on fire. Gary LaFontaine telling me to write a book, but he stayed on me, and I wrote that book. It took me about a winter and a half to get it done, and then he said I had to hire somebody to illustrate it because he loved the book and was going to publish it, and that wasn't an option. So I taught myself how to paint that next 4 months.
Wow, crazy! What's the book called?
It's called Currier's Quick and Easy Guide to Saltwater Fly Fishing. Awesome. Still out there. It's in its 4th printing now.
It sure is. Definitely a classic. It's funny because you talk about the different fisheries as well, like the freshwater, saltwater, river fishing. What's your favorite? Like, you're doing all this stuff for yellow dog as well. I'm very familiar with your various brands that and whatnot that you're an ambassador for. And, those brands are all over the place, whether it's saltwater, freshwater. What do you prefer? What's your passion? What drives you? Or is there one?
Well, that's the second most common question I get there, Greg. Usually people want to know what my favorite species is, but the next place is what's my favorite place to go or stuff to fish for. And there isn't one favorite because you go through phases in life, but I do love getting on airplanes and I do love traveling. And I would say right now, the thing I'm craving the most is the jungle. I just love, peacock bass fishing. I love tiger fishing. I love the fact that that's as far away as you can get from humans, in the middle of the Amazon or in the middle of Africa. And I love the whole package. I love the birds. I love the animals. I love the fact that there's a little bit of danger. I don't know why. That's kind of stupid. Most people would say that's not real smart. But for me, that's what drives me. I love that stuff.
What is it about a peacock bass? I know I'm kind of fascinated with it as well. I've never caught one, never been in the jungle at all. I mean, I'll throw it out there. I'm dying to go there. But, what is it that's so magical or methodical about that fish? Why is it a bucket list species for me as well? I can't answer that. Do you know why people are so fascinated with that, in your opinion?
Well, I think number one, it's a beautiful, beautiful fish. I mean, the pictures, you look at that thing and you have to have one. I mean, when you see a great big male with the colors and that hump in his head, you're just like, man, someday in my life I need to catch a peacock bass. And then you start looking, at the rest of the article that goes with it, and you're looking at that beautiful jungle. I mean, it's a stunning environment. And then the birds and the animals, and the fact that you're in the Amazon, which I think has always been kind of one of those hidden treasures for an American, because Teddy Roosevelt wrote the book and stuff. And I don't know, it's a whole package fish, and that's what got me there the first time. I mean, it was definitely a priority as far as my first exotic jungle trip. That's where I wanted to go. That was number one on the list.
I hear you, Jeff. What's the technical aspects of how you would fish for these fish? Walk me through that.
Well, that's the other intriguing thing too, because they don't come easy. They're kind of when they take a fly, I kid you not, when they take a fly, a big one, is basically almost impossible to stop. Anybody with no experience with them is going to get schooled. And what I mean by that fish takes the fly and he pulls just as hard as a 100-pound tarpon does. The difference is he only does it for 15 seconds, but 15 seconds is plenty of time to get you caught up in the bushes and broke off in a log. So I always laugh because I always want to be an observer when I'm with a new peacock bass guy, because it's just going to be such an incredible take. And they just look back at you so helpless, like, what just happened? I'm like, you just hooked your first peacock and you just broke your 40-pound test. It's the way it is. They're incredibly powerful.
I bet. No, for sure. And what about the flies that you're using for these guys? Is it topwater or what? How are you fishing?
Topwater is really good stuff. It's actually, a lot of times you're peacock bashing with two people. So the person in the front of the boat should be throwing a popper, because number one, they'll catch fish, but also they'll wake up some of the big ones down deep. And then the back of the boat should be a guy with a streamer. And the flies are big. It's not uncommon to be fishing a 4-aught streamer fly. And I like bright flies. I like, yellows and oranges. Those are really good.
Crazy. What's the final tip on Peacock Bass for anyone out there that's listening? That's like, hey, I'm gonna hit this fishery. What's something that you would give a newbie or a seasoned person? Just a tip.
I would say try to get on a hosted trip and go with a host that has a lot of experience. A lot of people will host a trip because they want to go on the trip too, and it may be their first time, and they might be. I'm sure they're great folks and just going down there with taking a group and having fun. But you need to have somebody with experience to make sure your leader's correct and make sure that like what I just told you. I will sit there, the first night with my clients and beat it into their head that when this fish takes your fly, you cannot let him take any line or you're not going to catch him, and show him how to do it. So that's the best advice I can get. Go with somebody that has experience with them.
I hear you. No, for sure. I mean, I've always stated that if you go back to my past episodes, that if you don't just show up at a destination fishery like that and try and wing it. So, for sure. Couldn't agree more. So, speaking of destinations and different fisheries, I know you were over in, the Indian Ocean, and you were catching big fish because I know it's what you do. Tell me about that, and tell me about some of the developments and technical aspects that came out of that trip.
Well, when you go to the Seychelles, you are usually being guided by South African anglers. And in fact, some of that jungle stuff, like my tiger fish trips that I go on, are with some guys from a company called African Anglers. They used to be called Tourette Fishing, but they changed to African Anglers. And there are a few outfits in Africa that are run by South Africans. And the first thing I learned on my first trip is that, they're not trying to break world records, which is when you have to use, 20-pound tippet or less. They're there to catch the fish. And for instance, the first time I went to Christmas Island, I only landed one big giant trevally because I got hit in a coral by the other 20 that I hooked. I mean, they're virtually impossible to catch because they live near a coral and they'll take you there. You can't stop the GTs. But now, that first trip over to the Seychelles, my guide's like, okay, we're going to fish straight 130-pound test here. When the GT grabs your fly, don't let him take any line. I mean, I looked at the guy like, that's impossible, isn't it? And he's like, no, Currier, you're bigger, you're stronger than even a 60-pound GT. Don't let him take any line. And then, I fished Bauer reels. He cranked up my drag and pulled on it. He goes, that reel will hold this fish. You just need to hang on to your rod, keep a bend in it, and don't let him pull you out to sea. And I said, well, dude, look, I'm 170 pounds. I'm going to get pulled out to sea. And the first time, GT took my fly and took off like that, and I tried to hold him, my fly line broke. So I said, we got a problem here, dude. These fly lines, the heaviest fly lines are like 40, 50 pounds. And our tippet's 130. We have an issue. And, that was the beginning of like SA making stronger lines. So a lot of people are familiar with their Titan papers. They got their big water Titan, which is 100-pound core. And that came about from a lot of my crazy trips. And not just the Seychelles, but also going to the jungle for arapaima. That's another fish where you really can't let him run. And that 100-pound core fly line is the answer. Now you can catch those fish much more often than you used to, as long as you're willing to fish heavy tippet and have the courage to hang on for dear life and do that tug of war, which is, I say courage, it is scary. Because I personally, with some of those fish, get pulled out into the water a little ways.
Really?
Not fun.
Wow. That's
terrifying.
I bet. So is there other dangers in the water, like if you're pulled out, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm getting pulled out to sea and, treading water, but yeah, you can get tipped over in the coral and get banged up. It seems like every time I host a group to the Seychelles, somebody gets cut up really bad in the coral or on the rocks. It definitely can happen.
Yeah.
But you get better at it. Eventually you start learning, rod angles. Most people, they're inexperienced people, are going to put a big bend in their fly rod, like they've seen in pictures their whole life. But the truth of the matter is you try to get that rod at a slight bend where it bends all the way down the cork, but just a little bit. And because you got that 130-pound test, a fish can't break that.
Crazy.
Unless you've got teeth, that's a different story. But, GT, he's going to fight in one place, and you break their spirit is what really happens.
Yeah, I bet. Hey, so just to clarify, Jeff, that's you're using walk me through your leader to line setup again for GTs.
Yeah, so let's say that I'm fishing GTs. I'm going to have on the big water Titan taper from Scientific Anglers, and it's a floating one. I do use some of their sinking ones as well when I'm going to dredge for grouper and stuff. But So I have that line, and then I go straight off the loop that the SA line comes with. I think those things are, over 100-pound test loop. And then I fish straight 130-pound test. And just like 4 to 6 feet of it is about what I use. There are some exceptions. If you go to a place that's the GTs have had a lot of pressure, like St. Brandon's Atoll is a place where there's not a whole bunch of GTs, but they have some gigantic resident ones. And so they've seen some flies there. So we usually fish a 10-foot leader for those. But in general, short 130-pound test, tie your fly on with a loop knot. And I use a non-slip model loop. I think that's a super strong loop. And hang on tight. Pretty simple.
You're killing me. I'd love to get out there like now.
You will.
Yeah. I'll take you up on that. So, hey, Jeff, I also want to touch base. I know that the whole COVID thing going on right now, unfortunately, like how obviously this has put a kibosh on all your travels and stuff. But what is next for you?
Well, I honestly don't know, when I'll be able to start traveling, but the closest thing I have on the books are actually quite simple. Once this happened, I backed off on booking things, anything big anyways. So I do have some trips back to the Indian Ocean, but they're not till 2021. I'm going to hold off. Unless it opens up, then I'll probably jump over there late this year. But the next thing I actually have on the books would be going to Minnesota to fish Lake Mille Lacs for walleyes and hopefully some big muskies. There's some huge muskies in that lake these days. And that'll be fly fishing with some of my buddies that live in that area that I went to college with. And then after that, I head up to New England to smallmouth fish for about 10 days. And I'll probably do a little trout fishing for brook trout up in northern New Hampshire as well. And, so just small trips like that throughout most of the summer. It's possible I'll go to Iceland in July, but it's not official yet. We'll see if I can travel there.
Nice. That I bet you that'll be fun up there for sure. So
yeah, it's great.
Have you been there before?
Yeah, I've been over there 3 times. I got some real good friends that are Icelanders that are in the fly fishing industry that, they outfit people for Atlantic salmon for those giant ice age brown trout. And, one of the reasons I get to travel too is not just the yellow dog, but there are quite a few lodges out there that, especially new lodges that want to have somebody come and see it and write about it. And my blog gets a lot of traffic. I have, between 5,000 and 8,000 viewers. And, if somebody Googles up fishing in, Golden Dorado in Bolivia, they're going to find out about Untamed Angling because I've been there and I've written, hit my day-by-day accounts.
Yeah.
So it's very valuable for these lodges to have that out there. And so I get lucky and get invited to these places.
Crazy. It's kind of like us with our lodge program as well. So,
sure.
Yeah. It's really cool. Hey, Jeff, what else you got going on? Is there anything else new, with Yellow Dog or any of your other ambassadorships?
No, just pretty much the same ones. I work now with I guess the newest one will be Fly Fishers International, which has been great. That's a group that's been around for many years, but they've been very trout oriented. Mm-hmm. And they brought me along to kind of change the image a little bit, but also get more people involved with it. And the fly fishermen today now, I would have to say, is almost like 50% trout and 50% other stuff, where it wasn't like that 20 years ago. And if you don't tap into that other stuff, then you kind of lose interest in people. So,
and you lose 50% of the market, right?
Exactly. So now, hopefully I get to be a big part of, getting more people involved in that. In fact, a week from tonight, let's see, today's Wednesday, May 6th, will be the first night that I'm going to do a presentation for those guys. And every Wednesday night for the month of May and the first week of June, I'm going to do like a 20-minute presentation and then take on questions and answers. And my first one next week will be about fishing in Iceland for Atlantic salmon and the giant brown trout of the lakes. And but my last one is going to be like the first week of June will be about fishing in Cameroon. So just off the wall stuff, but very educational and interesting, hopefully, to people. Even if they don't get to go to Cameroon someday, which most people, of course, are not, mm-hmm. It's kind of good to know that it's out there.
Absolutely crazy. It's funny. I was going to let you go, but now I'm going to ask you. What do you said you were you said you were going up to do some muskie fishing as well, and I'm like, What do you think about that fishery? I mean, I'm seeing more and more of that fishery like kind of popping up. Is it a refocused is the word I'm going to use? Refocused fishery, or do you find that it's getting more attention? Like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean, muskellunge in general? Musky fishing in general?
For fly fishing.
It's taken off. Yeah, it's been taken off gradually for probably 20 years, thanks to a guy named Bill Scherer, who's up in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is my old stomping grounds. I went to school at Northland College, so I know the area well, and I loved it so much. I go back at least once a year. I was already back there for a week ice fishing back in February. But in the last 10 years, now the muskie thing has taken off far beyond just Bill being, one and only few guides up there. Now there's quite a few people guiding muskies in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Actually down, Virginia, down in the South, North Carolina. You got Blaine Chocolate down there in Virginia, and he's catching probably some of the biggest muskies that are being caught in some of those southern rivers. I got to get down there and fish with Blaine next year. But this thing in Minnesota, Mille Lacs, that really hasn't been tapped into too much. It's a walleye fishery that has turned into an incredible muskie fishery, but I don't know many people that have fly fished it yet. So I don't know if we're going to do that well. We'll see. We'll give it a try.
All you can do is give it a try. So for sure, Jeff.
Yeah.
You know what? Definitely awesome stuff. I could probably spend an hour here with you. So, but I am going to let you go on this episode. But if someone wanted to reach out to you, talk to you, ask you questions again about that essay setup, or ask you questions about your travels and your upcoming stuff, where can they find you or reach out to you at?
Two places. JeffCurrier.com is my website, and there's a contact button on there. And then my Instagram is Jeff Currier 65, and that's a really good one because that I'm checking in on even when I'm traveling, because it just takes me a second and usually have my phone with me. So as long as I have service, I'll get your message. But I'm always, one of the things I love is helping people catch fish. So they can reach out to me anytime.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure I put all those details within the show notes as well, Jeff. So Jeff, listeners, thank you guys. Make sure you check it out. What is it? Wednesday, May 6th. Is that correct, Jeff?
That's right. Yep. And every Wednesday from there on after.
Absolutely. Follow his daily fishing blogs. That's crazy. His daily fishing blog since 2009. Guys, check it out. Jeff, I want to thank you for being a guest on Guided.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
No worries. You've been listening to the Guided Podcast, sponsored by Scientific Anglers. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know and leave a review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And remember, subscribe to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast to get even more episodes of both Guided and the Fly Fishing Insider each week. See more at flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com.